Welcome back, everyone, to Indications and Warnings with Chuck Pfarrer, co-produced by Alan Brewer. Chuck and I are recording this episode of Indications and Warnings on May 24, 2025. It is day 1186 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. Chuck and I are together today, the day after the most massive, really a horrific air assault on Kyiv, not only on Kyiv, it happened overnight. There were at least 9 Ukrainian civilians killed, 47 injured, as a result of 14 Iskander ballistic missiles and almost 250 drones. Chuck, I don't know if you saw photographs from Kyiv last night, but falling debris ignited a lot of fires, all in residential areas of the city.
Yep, the fires were so out of the norm that I suspect that the shahids were altered into incendiary weapons. And for example, integrating into the warhead powdered aluminum, which when the high explosive goes, the aluminum is turned into molten grains of sand. And of course, it burns like metal, and that will set pretty much everything on fire. We will have, Thomas will be putting up, thank you, Thomas, pictures of the Iskander missiles, which are a short-range ballistic missile system developed by the Soviets, used quite a bit by the Russians still. And as Alan pointed out, the intent of this attack was to murder Ukrainian civilians in their beds. Mm-hmm. All of this occurs center stage behind the backdrop of, wait for it, Russian negotiations with Ukraine. This is part of an escalating air campaign against Ukrainian cities. We've seen it, Alan, since you've gotten back and before you went over.
Yeah. If we see the same thing tonight, and we may well see it, I've seen reports, and it's roughly a little past 11 p.m., so a little past 2300 in Kyiv right now. Russian Tu-95 bombers have been launched. They're in the air. So we may see a repeat of last night's really horrific air attack, not only on Kyiv, but on Dnipropetrovsk, Odessa, Kharkiv, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia oblasts. In Kyiv, the air raid sirens sounded for more than 7 hours, Chuck.
The normal MO, again, for the Tu-95s is to deploy these missiles over the Caspian Sea. That is made necessary by what air defense capabilities that the Ukrainians do possess. And frankly, some of the air defense systems they have could probably target the Tu-95s over the Caspian Sea, but those capabilities are reserved for the defense of Ukrainian cities. If there is a golden aligning in this, it is that releasing the missiles from that far out, Alan, you get a considerable amount of warning, and Ukrainian civil defense does a pretty good job of warning everybody.
Well, civil defense warns everyone for sure. I know that a lot of residents in Kyiv did head for the shelters last night, and air defense around Kyiv was pretty successful in shooting down ballistic missiles and drones. At the same time, Ukraine air defense commanders are saying that the Russian ballistic missiles have become harder to shoot down. One reason is because they are now equipped, or better equipped, with decoys that are deployed as the ballistic missile approaches its target.
Yeah, very early in the war, the Iskander missile, it comes in two varieties, a conventional kind and a tactical nuclear weapon. Of course, a tactical nuclear weapon, whether it's strategic or tactical, it kind of doesn't matter to you as you melt into radioactive glass. But early in the war, in one of the first deployments of Iskander missiles, it was formerly a nuclear capable missile and was equipped with state of the art Russian decoys, which could have and should have been removed from this conventional tactical deployment of the missile. Early in the war, CIA, Western technologists were able to capture a tail section which had intact decoys. So I bring this up because a remedy may be happening. But again, there probably hasn't been a target in history, with the possible exception of London during the Blitz, where V2 ballistic missiles, vastly less sophisticated or accurate, were coming in. So if you have the city of Kyiv, for example, and there are 5, 10, 15 incoming ballistic missile threats at one time, not even the Nazis were ever able to do that to London. Not 15 missiles in the air and incoming.
So there are about 3 million residents in the city of Kyiv. What occurs to me, Chuck, if we see several consecutive nights of such attacks on Kyiv, and again, not only on Kyiv, but Odessa, Zaporizhia, Dnipropetrovsk, we see several nights in a row of this kind of escalated air assault. Is this a signal that indeed the Russians are starting a big push?
Well, I wouldn't say that this in itself is an indication and warning of major ground offensive operations coming. And we'll speak later when we get to the maps and talk about the zero line. It's not just a question of semantics with me. You and I sometimes disagree on that, as good partners should. But I would say this. I think Washington, certainly Europe does, but Washington really should start to take these attacks at face value. And the face value is Russia is not interested in negotiation. These attacks are going to continue to the maximum range and effect and number of missiles that Russia has available. And this exercise is intended to break the will and morale of the Ukrainian people and therefore pressurize Ukrainian leadership. Look, history shows us that it simply doesn't work, right? We refer again to the Blitz in London. That did not break the will of the British people. In fact, it galvanized them. The United States bombed Hanoi into lunar landscape. It did not break the will of the North Vietnamese. But what Washington needs to do, and Secretary Rubio, if you are listening, please take Putin at his word.
Yeah.
This is what he intends to do. These are not peace feelers. He is not going to negotiate. Let's take him at his word, and let's show him that actions have consequences.
We'll also take note of when Russia timed this horrific assault last night, and appears possibly another tonight. Over the 3 days that a 1,000 prisoner of war exchange is taking place, 2 days of this 1,000 for 1,000 have been completed. A third day tomorrow will bring the 1,000 to 1,000 exchange to a finish. So this is the kind of good news that in a way obscures Putin's real intentions to ramp up this summer, and I think through the fall, an attempt to grab as much more of Ukraine as he possibly can.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I still will say this. What I don't see happening is that Russia will launch a coordinated combined arms ground maneuver operation, multivalent attacks to get to the Dnipro River. That's how you win the war. Russia is not capable, in my opinion, of conducting those operations anymore. We'll speak about this just down the line here a little bit, but Putin just installed his fifth, count them folks, his fifth ground force commander in 1,018 days, whatever it is.
Right.
Look, not even Abraham Lincoln changed Union generals that often, right? It just didn't happen. So we're going to see, Alan. We'll see. But you're right. Russian offensive operations will ramp up starting now.
Yeah, they are ramping up. We are going to think about the number of engagements, where they're concentrated. We are going to look at maps. We're going to talk specifically about Highway 32. But just a word about Putin's new commander of Russia's ground forces in Ukraine. It's Colonel General Andrei Mordvichev, and he's been on the ground in Donetsk for a good part of this war. He is reputed to be the first commander on the ground who required his infantry units to integrate drones into their attacks and into their maneuvers. That struck me as interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, and it's yet to be proven as a workable concept. So why do I say that? Everyone's familiar with the drone videos. You've seen first-person drones attack everything from individual soldiers to columns of tanks, anti-aircraft systems, electronic warfare, battlefield radar, high-value targets prosecuted by Ukrainian drones. What anyone, anywhere in the world has yet to demonstrate to me is, how do you link X number of drones in the air with your attacking force? I don't see it. So try to envision this. I've got 8, 10, 15 drones in the air. I've got 15 tanks on the ground. I've got infantry behind them in a typical Russian column, and we're attacking the enemy. Here's what I say to our Russian listening guests. You generally don't know where the Ukrainians are. You generally don't find them, right? You discover that their drones have discovered you, and then artillery fire called in by those same drones are thundering down on you. To our new general, good luck. What are you going to do with your drones? They can circle and film the chaos for posterity. One other thing, Alan, that you and I point out all the time is these Russian attacks are so ill-planned, so ill-executed by such untrained soldiers that they always occur in broad daylight. And they always occur in a column formation, which is pathetic.
You'd think they would have learned that lesson by now. And, the other thing that strikes me, I mean, it's one thing to say that Russia is going to increase as much as possible its pressure on Ukrainian defenses throughout the summer. And that is not saying that Russia is going to launch combined armed maneuver offensives. But it does appear that they are gathering forces at different points up in Kharkiv and Sumy. Russian forces are apparently numbering 50 to 60,000 down around Pokrovsk and now west of Chasiv Yar, south of Kostyantynivka, another concentration of Russian forces. So it looks like they are trying to put the pieces together for once again launching offensive operations on multiple axes. This is actually one of the things that got them into trouble when they launched the all-out invasion in 2022. They had insufficient troops, and they were attacking from 3 or 4 different directions. No coordinated command of those attacks, and each and every axis suffered from its own logistical problems. They weren't the same logistical problems, and the Russians failed to solve those problems. The very same thing could create a military disaster for Russia, which is my sincerest hope this summer of 2025.
Yeah, I would hope so as well. And Alan, you pointed out, you get an A for today's debrief. They Russian there are no Russian generals that came up like somebody like Mick Ryan or General Ben Hodges. There is nobody that started out as a young platoon commander, worked up to be a company commander, got on the battalion staff, went to the war college. So why doesn't that happen in Russia? Because you're in on the grift, right? You're part of the mafia family. You cover for the guy who stole 20 tank engines, etc. So ergo, at the top, there are no competent military leaders at flag level. There's not. Okay. Am I worried that Russia has pulled its head out of this summer and they are going to now hit this with a joint command structure that can handle 5 major axes of attack? And the goal is by September to get to the Dnipro River. At the risk of underestimating my enemy, I don't think they will. Mm-hmm. But I take the fact that there are 50, 60, maybe 80,000 men being placed into position. Okay, does that alarm me? Yeah, it does. But here's what I think the Russians will do. They will feed those troops piecemeal into attacks. They are not going to, secure a contingent supply and concentration point near the zero line, defend it, and hit the Ukrainians with complete organic large-scale brigade task groups. I don't see them doing that. Okay, so should I be alarmed? They're going to feed X number of people in the thousands every day up to the front. I think that's going to happen. But here's the way I look at it. Let's say they've got 50,000 warm bodies ready to go. They lose 1,000 people a day. Mm-hmm. 1 battalion a day they burn. That gives them 50 days, right? What are they going to do in 50 days? Look, they're going to capture some ground, but at prohibitive cost. And remember, Putin said, I'm in this for 2 million men. Yeah. His words, not mine, quoted in an interview with the New York Times. At the end of the summer, Alan, he's going to be halfway there. Yeah. He's already halfway there. He's going to be 3/4 of the way there. Yeah. So we'll see offensive action. Absolutely.
I think that is exactly the measurement to consider. The Russian casualty rate, it had dipped below 1,000 for the last few days, even though battle engagements had remained around 200. And again, centered in Pokrovsk, and we're going to look at Pokrovsk. But they've popped back up above 1,000. And I think, 1,000 a day. As offensive engagements rise through the summer, I think you are likely going to see, once again, Ukraine inflicting upwards of 2,000 casualties a day on Russia. So you use that odometer, the Russian odometer, I'll call it, the number of casualties you can lose in 50 or 60 days of an offensive campaign in the summer. And suddenly that force of 60,000 you've assembled is destroyed.
It is. They are losing a division or even an army, which is the next thing up the food chain from a division, meaning 30,000 dead a month.
Yeah.
Okay. That's staggering. But Alan and I watched the zero line very carefully, constantly, daily, sometimes 2-3 times a day.
Yeah.
I don't see much, there's generally not a lot of movement to pay for 30,000 dead. And to just put this, let's just keep this in perspective, folks. 50,000 people were killed in the Vietnam War in 10 years. So half the number of dead every month, not 5 years, every month. Yeah. And they're also burning through equipment, tanks, APCs, AFVs, battlefield radars, air defense systems. All of it is going up in smoke. So, 100,000 feet, Russia's never going to win this war. Yeah. How long Ukraine has got to keep killing Russians and suffering, I hate to say it, that's up to Washington.
Well, it's up to Washington, it's up to London, it's up to Paris, it's up to Berlin, it's up to Rome, it's up to Warsaw. I hope are some things that the EU will be able to do, whatever Donald Trump decides to do in Washington or Mar-a-Lago or wherever the hell he is. But the idea that Russia will continue to feed its forces piecemeal into attacks against Ukraine. This is what they've been doing unsuccessfully for the last 12 to 15, 16 months, even longer than that. And just recently, we mentioned this on the last show, Chuck, but I want to emphasize it again. It costs Russia 17,000 casualties to capture 100 square kilometers. Now, folks can get an idea of how small a piece of territory that is. It's not even as large as Lake Tahoe, if anyone has ever visited Lake Tahoe. Okay.
And it's a box 6 miles on a side.
Yeah.
Okay. Back in the day, you go for a 6-mile run, it was like no problem. It's right. It is not consummate to the waste of human life.
No. Anyone who's flown through the Denver airport, it's not the country's largest airport, 100 square kilometers. The Denver airport is larger than that. So just imagine taking 117,000 troops killed and wounded to not quite take all of Denver airport. This is the casualty rate that Russia is suffering.
And it's, look, it's two things encourage me, and I should encourage everyone else. There are a couple of things going on in the leadership warfighting calculus here. At the top, it doesn't matter how many generals Putin reaches down the cesspool tube and drags into the light and puts in command. None of them are qualified. None of them. If you joined the Russian military 25 years ago, hoping to become a marshal and serve the motherland, you were very quickly disabused of your choice of profession. It's a crime family, right? It wasn't serving the nation. You weren't even necessarily honored by your peers, as has happened in the United States and other countries with an all-volunteer force. So there's one thing. Bad leadership, that's bad. No NCO corps, the backbone of any military. Okay, I don't have a head, now I don't have a spinal column. We talked years ago about the training deficit. They're in a training death spiral. You join the Russian military, 2 weeks later, you got a bayonet in your hand and you're on the zero line. Your chances of survival, Alan, are 0.
Yeah.
The square root of 0.
That's bringing it down to a few hours, if not minutes. Look, in addition about the Russian command, 6,000 Russian officers, colonels. This really for Russia is a colonel's war. They are the ones running things on the front line. 6,000 of these folks who have hoped for advancement through the ranks of the Russian mafia army. 6,000 have been killed or wounded in Ukraine. They're of no service whatsoever to Russian ground forces.
Yeah, and let's examine, the last kind of real fighting war that the U.S. was in, and let's just call that Vietnam. The number one grade of officer who was killed in ground combat in Vietnam was not a colonel, not a major, it was a lieutenant. It was the lowest ranking officer at the very front, and they got killed more than anybody proportional in the entire food chain because they were at the front, adapting, overcoming, and improvising. That's the job that would be normally done by a captain, an O3 in the American Army. A company commander is done by a colonel, an O6, because nobody can do their job right? Nobody can do it. You can't give an order down the chain of command and expect that your subordinates are going to do it by the book, because in 2 weeks, you don't see the book. You don't read it. You don't know anything. And you don't even have basic combat survival skills. The difference between incoming and outgoing, et cetera, et cetera. And
Yeah.
they're dying in their tens of thousands.
Yeah. We are going to get to some maps here, in just a moment, and we're going to focus on the H-32 highway. But before we get there, the other reason I think that this summer really is going to be pivotal in this war, and remember, this is now 11 years of war between Ukraine and Russia. There have already been pivotal moments in this war. We've covered them right here on Indications and Warnings, Chuck. But my feeling is that this summer is going to be yet another pivotal moment in the war as a test of Ukraine's drone wall of defense. It really is going to become a summer of intense drone-on-drone warfare. And someone is either going to come out a winner, or Ukraine is going to fight this thing to a draw once again. What are your thoughts about drone-on-drone warfare this summer?
Good, really splendid point there. So we've gone through, what is it, 3 or 4 summers since the full scale invasion.
This is our 4th summer. It's Russia's 4th campaign season to accomplish its military objectives, which it's failed to do.
So, let's look at the past as an indicator of what may happen in the future. Look, Russia is trying to win this war, right? Putin is looking for a General Grant who's going to get to Richmond and drag Jeff Davis out by his necktie. He's never going to find that cat. Okay. Russia is going to increase the tempo of offensive operations this summer. And again, notice it's not just semantics. I'm not saying, or do I predict large-scale offensive, but they are going to throw bodies at the problem. What Ukraine's drone capabilities 4 years ago are not what they are now. Now they have tens and hundreds of thousands of drones available to them, piloted by the most experienced pilots in the world. And once again, we go to this thing I always like to pick on. If you are a defender in a covered position, your enemy has to maneuver towards you. He makes dust, he makes noise, he walks, he has a thermal signature, and you can kick his ass, right? That's why it takes 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 to 1 to overwhelm a defensive position. And I use this analogy all the time. If you need to take somebody out in an alley, you want to take them on 1-on-1, 2-on-1, or you want 5 of your friends? Okay, this is what Russia can't do. They can't get 5 guys converging on one spot. So again, it's dangerous to hit the crystal ball. I should learn what Mick Ryan does, but I see this will be the bloodiest and most costly summer for Russia since the war started. And they're maneuvering right into the Ukrainian trap. All they got to do is sit back and wait. It's 10:30 in the morning. Here they come.
Look, There's an air raid alert going off right now in Kyiv. Since leaving Kyiv, Chuck, I've kept my air alert app live on my
Absolutely.
phone, and it is it's now after midnight in Kyiv. So this is the first air raid siren of the night going off. Uh, that was a look. It's a real life interruption. Exactly what's happening in Kyiv is happening right here on indications and warnings. But Chuck and I don't have to go to a bomb shelter. That's the difference. It's going to be go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say I'm glad to have that because look, we talk theory and practice and look into the future. It's good to be reminded what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Some mother has wakened her kids up and taken them to the bomb shelter, folks.
Yep. That's exactly right. So yeah, I agree with you, Chuck. This is going to be probably the deadliest and most lethal summer campaign that the Russians have waged in Ukraine since 2022. It could be equally so for Ukrainian civilians in the cities and for Ukrainian soldiers on the front. That's why this is becoming a late round in a heavyweight fight, don't you think?
I do. And again, we need only to look what's been going on in the last couple of rounds. The Ukrainian salient that they established in Kursk was only lost. The predicate reason that was lost was that Washington turned off the Ukrainian intelligence feeds. It still took the Russians, blindfolded Ukrainians, it took the Russians greater than 50,000 casualties to retake that area. We don't hear very much about North Korean infantry much these days, do we, Alan?
No.
Because their casualties were estimated at 30 to 60%. So if you went over there with your Kim Jong-un pin on, you're dead. Okay, so I don't see this summer, please God, the United States turning off Ukrainian intelligence. They will be fed completely, and the Russian adversary is facing not quite, but almost unlimited drones. And it's the Russians, not the Ukrainians, that have to maneuver in that drone-dense environment. So this new general who thinks offensive application of drones is going to save him in the same manner that integrated artillery fire would have, good luck to him. I don't see it happening.
Well, Ukraine, I think, does have the drone advantage. When you talk about the Ukrainian drone wall of defense, you really are talking about a 40-kilometer wide kill zone that Ukraine is trying to create almost solely with drones. And I think that there are now so many different kinds of drones in the air, piloted by both Ukrainians and Russians. And they're not just recon drones. I think Ukraine excels at drone warfare in the night. They use recon drones in the night. They have heavy lift drones that are out there laying new minefields with personnel mines. This drone on drone summer is just going to be critical to watch. I think that the Ukrainians will show they do have the upper hand. I worry about insufficient infantry in the prepared defensive lines that Ukraine will have to fall back to in probably a few places.
Yeah, and there is the irony of the entire situation. You have one combatant who has manpower in abundance and is not squeamish about killing everybody in an attack. On the other side, You have a combatant who works as much as possible to preserve the lives of their soldiers, the men and women on the zero line. Nothing could be more, yin and yang than that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, let's get to the maps. You know the way we talked before the show, Chuck. This is one of my worry days. I'm pessimistic, and I'm pessimistic because I have my eye on the H-32, which runs, I guess, as the crow flies. You're talking about 70 or 90 kilometers. But it winds its way from Pokrovsk all the way to Kostyantynivka, which is just southwest of Chasiv. So it winds its way just north of Toretsk, for that matter. It really makes Chasiv just as a landmark, and Toretsk and then Pokrovsk, the center of the zero line that we're going to see tested this summer.
Yeah, I will get a map up. The gist of it is that the Russian forces are pushing hard south of Chasiv Yar. And as Alan pointed out, the H-32 highway goes through Bakhmut and heads down south and west towards Pokrovsk. This is an avenue of advance, right? And if this were General Patton working for the Russians, he would get his troops, he would smash through south of Chasiv Yar, and he would roar down the H-32. That ain't going to happen, folks. That's the way it's done. By the way, the Russians have had 3 years to do it, and they have not. And they will not. But they're going to try. When you get to Kostyantynivka, which is, I will say, by the end of the summer, October, look, we could be looking at either a threatened city or a city that might actually be taken by the Russians. But city, I say advisedly. There isn't much left of Kostyantynivka. However, before anyone thinks I'm getting to sour grapes before I can even see them, when you can look at the map and you look closely at Kostyantynivka, you can see that just like Bakhmut, there are only two ways out of Kostyantynivka, one to the northwest, one to the southwest. You take Kostyantynivka and you do not open up new avenues for you to advance. Again, because these roads diverge, you will never have your forces operating in a mutually supportive way. That's why it was idiotic to take Bakhmut, because it didn't afford you opportunities for advancement. It was stupid to take Bakhmut because there was always going to be Chasiv Yar in your rear. Now, perhaps the Russians might actually get to Kostyantynivka this summer, but I don't think they're going to be able to take Chasiv Yar. You don't want the bad guys.
They're already through Chasiv Yar. You don't think they're going to be able to take Kostyantynivka? Yeah,
I don't think they're going to be able to get through Chasiv Yar. And here's another reason why, Alan. There's no roads out of Chasiv Yar.
well, this is true. There are no roads out of Chasiv Yar. There's just a railroad.
Right.
The Russians are not quite through Chasiv Yar. That is true. But I think they are on the verge of getting through Chasiv Yar. I mean, and you're right, there's nothing left of Chasiv Yar. And what the Russians are looking at, it seems to me, is this big pocket south and west of Kostyantynivka, looking down towards Toretsk. It's a big pocket that, again, talking about Patton, he'd look at that pocket and say, we can close it. And I would assume that the Russians are looking at the pocket in exactly the same way.
Absolutely. They're looking at that. And the best way to do that is combined arms ground maneuver warfare, something that the Russians are barely able to do anymore.
Yeah.
So let's, before everyone, says, look, Chuck's always optimistic, this and that. Chuck's a naval officer. Let's refer to one of my favorite military experts, who is General Mick Ryan. He looks at this map and he says, so what?
Okay.
He says, if you take Kostiamvinka, the world's not going to end. And one of the reasons he says that, he is informed by the same maps that our listeners are looking at, the ones I draw and the ones that Alan and I talk about. And again, you got Kostiamvinka, you have a highway going to the northwest, and you have one going to the southwest. It's not a springboard for you. Mm-hmm. You get there and it's a binary decision. You can go one way or the other. If you go both ways, you will be dividing your force in the face of a superior enemy, which is suicide.
Yeah.
But all of this goes back to they expended 100,000 men to take Bakhmut.
Yeah.
And 3 years ago, Alan, we were talking about, let's look 3 years ahead. What do they get out of this? They might get Kostiamvinka, but nothing's changed, really.
Yeah.
I know it's bad, Alan, and I know it's bugging you, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah. And look, the reason you can't run down the H-32 is because of drones, because of that 40-kilometer wide kill zone. It's not just drones that are zeroing in on Russian logistics on their ground lines of communications. Ukrainian drones have their eye on every single axis of advance that the Russians could attempt. And that's why this is people are going to see how much war has changed in the course of this summer. As I've said, drones have changed warfare, changed it again and again and again. There's everything in the air now, from cardboard reconnaissance drones to newly developed Shahed knockoff drones that the Ukrainians have designed that are actually a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, and we always talk about how this war has revolutionized ground combat, but it just keeps the revolution keeps going on, and it's not incremental. Tactics change, technology changes, and it changes everything again. So, to our Russian listening guests, good luck this summer, because no one on Earth, no military leaders on Earth know what does it mean when your large ground maneuver warfare elements, right? What does that mean when they enter an environment where there are thousands of drones in the air? What does that mean? Your instrument, right? Your brigade task group and its appendages and ground line of communications, you are no longer the instrument of foreign policy. You're the freaking target.
Yeah.
Imagine that. You've got 1,000 vehicles in a convoy, like Patton. They've got 1,000 drones that cost $600 each, and they don't miss. So this is one of the reasons why, I'm not really uptight about this summer. And I think, Alan and I will get a chance to inform ourselves a bit more in the future. I will leave it at that, probably.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I try to inform myself every single day, and every single day something catches my attention. I look at Chuck's maps every day, and I basically pore over them, and then compare them to the deep state map. And sometimes I have to take a day off. Usually a holiday weekend like this in the United States, you don't see Chuck and I here on a Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. But here we are because of conditions on the ground in Ukraine and events overnight in the skies of Ukraine. So if we keep looking at the H-32 highway, Chuck, it brings us eventually down north of Touretsk. And this is a map from 23 May. Again, this is a small pocket to the west of Touretsk. And and Ukraine has had some success of fighting into the city of Toretsk, only to retreat, but they're back again. This Toretsk map, much like the Pokrovsk map, is very fluid, back and forth for both Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, so we talk about this a lot. You've got the red line on the map, and it gives you an idea of what is under control of what side, but that line is very amorphous.
Yeah.
And if you look at the live view map, and you look at deep state map, and you look at my map, I have the luxury of having two big brothers up there that I can extrapolate between, because those maps almost never match each other.
No.
They just don't. So we see this going back and forth. But again, to get back to the drone warfare and just the nature of this war, it's one side is the aggressor, and they are aggressing, and that is the Russians. So they keep coming at the Ukrainians, and the Russians expend hundreds and hundreds of casualties to gather 100 yards. Okay, good on you. You grabbed 100 yards. Now you have to endure Ukrainian drone strikes that quite literally are going to hunt down every man you send for water, everybody who breaks cover to go to the bathroom, everybody who's carrying a wounded buddy back. And your force that you achieved your objective with, it withers away.
Yeah.
So again, this informs what, I'm not going to say Alan and I think, because we do differ, and that's good, because between us is the real answer. I'm not sure this Russian increase in offensive operations is really going to achieve much.
Okay.
It will achieve something. It's going to work in some places, but it isn't going to win the war.
Yeah. I think you make a good point there, Chuck. We don't know exactly where the zero line is, precisely because of drone warfare. And stop and think, if Ukraine is intent on creating this 40-kilometer wide kill zone, that's pretty deep behind the zero line as it shows up on anyone's map, whether it's your map or deep state, anyone's map. I don't care who draws the map. How you depict that kill zone depends on what you know about the presence of drones in that area. And we don't always know where drones are concentrated until reports, as they come from Pokrovsk, for example, of that now being the most drone saturated area of the battlefield. But I don't know what it's like around Toretsk.
Right. And we see this. So what that 40-kilometer drone death zone actually means is about 20 miles from the zero line, you're a Russian trying to get to work. You are in danger of getting picked off by a drone. And the nicer the vehicle you're in, a tank or an APC, or you're driving an important ballistic missile systems, air defense systems, 20 miles from the front, you're liable to get it. Yeah. The closer you get to the zero line, they're going for individual people. They'll just get you.
Yep.
Your motorcycle, whatever. But here's the interesting thing about that. In World War II, 20 miles from the front was in the rear with the gear and the beer. You could get a shower, you could get a hot meal, you could get your rifle fixed, you could get a new uniform, and that isn't the way it is anymore. This is this also complicates Russian attacks. They can't put a depot there. And so at 20 miles, which incidentally is about as far as a trained infantryman is expected to move in one day under permissive conditions. Mm-hmm. And think of it with 100 pounds on your back going 20 miles. Alan and I have got a lot of outdoor experience. That's a big hump, Alan.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big up. But just to put that in, that's why you see an uptick in videos of Ukrainian drones, very often, wire-guided drones, coming into barns, hangars, buildings, and they're finding Russian tanks.
Mhm.
They're finding armored vehicles because within that magic 20-mile area, they've got to hide. But that complicates everything for the Russians. This is one of the things that really makes it unlikely that they can get a big group of people to the front and kick some Ukrainian ass.
Yeah.
Don't you wish, Vladimir? But these are the complexities.
So in a way, drones almost require the Russians to use this piecemeal offensive tactic that they've adopted over the last couple of years. I know they've obviously attempted the large-scale armored maneuver, and it's failed dramatically, all thanks to drones.
It has, and that's why I bring this up. Nobody knows. You get the United States Army out there, and you get an armored division. Nobody knows what it's like to fight an enemy who's going to put 1,000 drones up in the air.
Yeah.
Every square kilometer's got it's got 500 drones up.
Yeah.
Man, nobody knows. And this isn't something that the Russians evolved in response to increasing Ukrainian threats. They were always fighting like that. And finally, that has a benefit. But honestly, Alan, I would want to be a Russian colonel or a brigadier this summer, because I'm getting told to take some ground that requires larger formations, which will get wiped out quicker. And we've already seen, look, the battles of Vuhledar 1 and 2.
Yeah.
The 15th Naval Infantry Brigade got wiped out like snot on a doorknob. Kupiansk, they had a battalion-sized attack. It was destroyed in 20 minutes.
Yeah. And that's the past. Yeah, we're talking about a summer in which we are going to see drones change warfare before our eyes in dramatic ways that we can't even predict. I think probably one of the things you're going to see this summer is an increase of drone on drone warfare. The Ukrainians are struggling to deal with these fixed wing Russian drones, the Lancet, which has been particularly deadly over Ukrainian positions. But I think they're going to figure that one out. And you have also seen Ukrainian drones take down a number of larger Russian drones, especially their recon drones. That's the other aspect of this summer going forward, that we haven't really seen drone on drone warfare in the skies over Ukraine.
And what we're also looking at is it isn't just this has revolutionized every aspect of modern war. The war at sea, it's revolutionized. Yeah. Ground warfare, it's revolutionized. And in terms of drone on drone fights in the air, we see the democratization of air superiority, right? So I've got an infantry squad on the ground. There's a reconnaissance threat up there I look at some of the videos, man, some of it's 5,000, 6,000 feet, 7,000 feet. And I've got an air to air battle going on up there.
Yeah.
My DJI Mavic versus their Lancet.
Yeah.
And we see there have been hundreds, thousands of air to air kills. And what that also requires is an integrated sensor network for the Ukrainians, right? To pick these things up, whether it's audio, there are some other means I won't get into, and simple radar. We're going to see that. In fact, we are seeing it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the other thing. I mean, people might think that all the innovations and improvement of radar have already been made because, I mean, my God, radar is an 80, 90-year-old technology at this point, but they haven't already all been made. Ukraine is looking for especially small-scale radar that can be deployed across the zero line especially good at detecting the fiber optic drones of Russia. These are the most difficult drones to detect, and they are wreaking some havoc on Ukrainian lines, Chuck.
Yeah, and in the battle of wire-guided drones, Ukraine is fielding drones that have a 40-mile capability wire guide.
Yeah,
So what that means is you've got a spool on the ground and a spool on the drone with 20 miles of cable in each one. So you imagine this. And it's basically, it looks like fishing line, pretty much. And out it goes. But it's right. We're going to see other evolutions, and I won't get into this too much, but in 3 years, I'll be really happy to talk about it. And let's just talk about this as Skynet. And it's a combination of drones that have algorithmic target prosecution schemes, right? They see a guy on a bike, they see a guy on foot, and they see a moving armored personnel carrier. They can prioritize those targets, right? They compute their own range, left, battery life, etc. Can I get to this? What are the chances of attack? Bang. But the thing that Russia is going to have to deal with is not just individual target algorithms, but a system of drones that talk to one another. Again, and this is what Alan was saying earlier, we get to these revolutions and then you get to the next revolution and they are not iterative. They are mind blown.
yeah, they
right?
really are. I mean, the more I learn about drone warfare, the more I learn, some uh, some drone teams, just a couple of guys uh, at night, for example. It just takes a couple of guys operating Ukrainian heavy lift drones to create a whole new minefield where there wasn't one the day before. That they have to work through the night to do that. And then other drone teams, five guys together on a drone team, picking off individual Russian soldiers in the field, picking off Russian armor, Russian trucks, interdicting Russian logistics. But, these are different drones, armed differently, with different missions, require different trained teams. It's a pretty complex field of warfare that's developed very, very quickly.
And talking to Scruff and other friends we have who are
Yeah.
in the fight, it's you can become a specialist in a certain type of drone, just like you could be an F-15 guy or an F-16 guy, or you're flying F-35s. You specialize. And from what I understand, and again, I'm not stealing anybody's thunder here because I don't do it. If you're flying a wire-guided drone, it has different flight parameters. It has different envelopes in which it likes to operate, different regimes. Your turns are different. You've got to remember you're dragging a wire, but guys become really good at that.
Yeah.
Some guys are really good at hitting moving targets. Some guys are really good at dropping things into an open hatch, which just constantly amazes me. If
Yeah.
you've ever been to the Maine State Fair and you try to get a baseball into one of those milk jugs, you think about doing that, 300 feet in the air. It's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing, and you're doing it all with a screen about the size of my laptop or smaller,
Yeah.
and controls that I wouldn't be able to manipulate
No.
because it's too much like knitting. It's
We
it's
can't
small.
do it.
No.
We're geezers.
Yeah.
We ain't that guy.
No, we're not. So if we follow the H32 again to the next map, and this is one of the things that intrigues me, and it's one of the things I looked at it more than a month ago at this point, is where does the H32 take me along the zero line? And now it takes us from Pokrovsk to Touretsk all the way to Kostyantynivka. And the battle in Pokrovsk has also gone back and forth, which is something as I said a couple of days ago, Chuck really caught me by surprise. And again, it's the H-32 that is coming within the sights of Russians advancing to the west of Pokrovsk, or actually to the east of Pokrovsk. I'm sorry, but the H-32
Yeah.
winds around Pokrovsk and then keeps heading off to the west northwest.
Yeah, they have, the Russians are actually now, and this has happened a couple of times. They've actually reached the H-32 highway there in the vicinity of Kutry.
Yeah,
That has gone back and forth. Kutry has, as far as I could tell, because no one really says it, but there isn't much left of that little town to begin with. It was a gas station and
yeah,
650 houses maybe. But the Russians have gotten there. They get across. They get driven back. You know, Russian general looking at the map, and it must really frustrate these guys because you look at Pokrovsk, and it appears on the map that look, we might be able to project our power and link up our forces to the north of Pokrovsk and take the town. They can't do it, right? They can't. It must be frustrating because even if I was busy all the way climbing to generals, stealing everything I could lay my hands on and selling it, I must have read one or two books on ground maneuver warfare, and it must be extremely frustrating for a Russian listening guest to realize they can't do things by the book.
yeah,
Right? They can't seem to pull it off the way it should be done. And in lieu of that are these squad and company size engagements like we talk about, Alan, and they are so costly. No other nation on earth can do what Russia is right now. Normally, if you are a tin pot dictator, right? If Saddam Hussein had lost 1 million people, he'd probably get overthrown.
yeah,
But with Russia, first of all, he's willing to do it. I don't think he's going to get serious about peace until I take him at his word. He suffers 2 million casualties.
yeah,
And even then, I would expect him to keep doing what he's doing. Destroy every city that he possibly can. Every habitation, crossroad, and village within striking distance of the zero line, he'll destroy that
Yep.
simply out of spite.
Yep.
And that's the way they're going to do it until Ukraine is equipped enough to launch these offensives and push them back. And then I think, Alan, we're going to see them fall apart like they did in Kherson and like they did in Kharkiv, losing 20, 30, 40 kilometers a day.
Yeah.
I think that'll happen again.
It could. I hope it does. I don't think it's going to happen this summer. In one way, Putin will have one hand on the face of Donald Trump, keeping him away from the war for the summer, and with his other hand, Putin is going to try and punch Ukraine in the gut this summer. That is kind of the way I see the summer unfolding in that dramatic fashion. But we are going to keep our eye on the H-32. The H-32 is going to become very familiar to viewers here. It's going to become very familiar to me, in particular. Chuck already has walked it all the way from Pokrovsk to Kostyantynivka. He knows the lay of the land, and I'm going to get to know it equally well. But I want to go to the question that I posed to you earlier today, Chuck. Just given everything we've seen and some of the pieces that Russia seems to be pulling together, including this horrific attack on Kyiv and other cities in Ukraine last night, maybe another one tonight. Is Russia starting its big push?
It's hard to say. And here's one of the reasons why it's hard to say. You know, it is not inconsequential that Putin has put 5 commanders in this war.
Mhm.
You know, you don't just hire a new general. He literally arrives with staff officers that he has basically worked with for years. At least this is how it works in a Western army. And you've got a 4-star general, and you work for him as a junior officer. He gets a new command. He might say, you know what? I want Alan Brewer. He gets him. I want this guy for my chief of staff. I want this guy. It takes a while, you know, to build that staff, which is about the size of a baseball team.
Yeah.
Right.
Not the one
And
on
you're
the field, the one in the
not
on
the
the
one on the
field and
field.
in the dugout.
The whole organization.
Yeah.
So, you know what? And I have no doubt that Putin, who has no military background, simply says, look, I want this war won this summer.
Yeah.
And it's the sword of Damocles. You say, I look, you can't refuse the job. You get thrown off a balcony. You've been told to achieve the unachievable. You've got a mission that cannot be actualized. We'll see. I'll make this bold prediction. This general will not be serving in this capacity come October.
Okay.
I promise you.
Okay.
I'll write that down. We'll take a bet.
I will write that down. You know, one thing we haven't heard from Putin is a date. I mean, he's often announced dates that he wants to see victories achieved by. Hasn't done that, but I agree with you. I think he has told this new general, and I think he's told the higher command of the military, he wants to finish this war this summer by taking as much more Ukrainian territory as possible. Well, we'll see how they do. We'll see. You know, if you're going to take a couple of square kilometers at the cost of 10,000 casualties, you're going to run out your clock pretty damn soon in the summer of 2025. So, you know, here's this question: has Russia started its big push of summer 2025? I think they are on the verge of starting it, Chuck.
Yeah, I would go one step farther. I think they have started it.
There you go. That actually is an excellent way to put it.
Yeah, it's what they think, and that's what they're reporting up the line. And remember, this mafia family too. It all ties into Putin. Never gets a factual. It never lands on his desk. Here's what happened yesterday. It doesn't. It gets filtered through this entire level with, astoundingly, Gerashimov and Shoigu still circling the campfire up there, trying to make this look as good as possible. It isn't good. So Putin is trapped in this. He's got the idiots he has to work with them. And here's another thing that Putin has to worry about. It's that these sanctions are finally going to shut off his ability to trade oil on the world market. I mean, by seizing these tankers, by interdicting them, by locking them up. We'll see. There's so much that could be done, Alan. You know everything that I know, what they could do, why they haven't.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, after, again, last night's aerial assault on Ukraine, inaction by the EU or by Donald Trump, for that matter, or by the 81 senators who have co-sponsored a Russian sanction bill in the U.S. Congress. Inaction is not an option for Washington, London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, Warsaw, you name it. It's just impermissible to do nothing. And you have issued ultimatums. You've made promises like Merritt's, I'll deliver Taurus missiles to Ukraine. You got to follow through on that promise pretty damn fast.
Alan, and as we wrap up, I want to ask you, because you've worked on the Hill, you know its workings, it's in and out. You just mentioned a magic number to me, 80 senators, and if you're not American, folks, there are 100. Can you really get something done with 80 senators?
You can get a lot done with 80 senators, especially when one of the co-sponsors is the majority leader, John Thune. Uh, that bill should get to the floor of the Senate next week. I don't know if it will or not. I'm sure Donald Trump is completely opposed to it, but 80 senators is also a veto-proof majority. So if Trump vetoes any bill that comes out of Congress to sanction Russia, and Marco Rubio says, please don't do that, Russia will stop talking to us. Well, that is exactly why the US Congress should do it. And I think Ukraine supporters in the House have enough votes to pass this legislation as well. I don't know if it would be veto proof, but it's veto proof in the US Senate. And that's pretty important. So, yeah, can you get something done with 80 senators? You can get a hell of a lot done with 80 senators, Chuck. Maybe,
Glad to hear it.
Maybe we could get 80 senators in concert to learn how to say Slava Ukraini.
And I'll teach the House to say Heroim Slava.
Thank you, Chuck, for this holiday weekend edition of Indications and Warnings. It's May 24, 2025. It is day 1186 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. And this is the second air raid alert going off in Kyiv tonight.
12:30 in Kyiv, folks. That's what the war is all about. Russia does not want peace. They are not negotiating. And Alan and I will be talking to you shortly. So thanks again for listening.
Good night, Chuck.
Night, Alan.